with the Nets. 4 years, $198 million max contract extension, and he'll sign it at some point once he becomes eligible to do that today on Saturday. That, according to what his representation tells ESPN's Adrian Wojnarowski. Now, there is one Team USA superstar who has not seen his team have a solid free agency at all, and that's Damian Lillard. And he said Friday, quote, they didn't get guys they would have liked. Now, Brian, how has Portland's lack of notable moves here affected Lillard's desire to stay with his team?
Yeah, you know, we've been down this road 3 or 4 times just in the last month, and it's hard to read what Dame is talking about. I think he really just wanted all in. He wanted them to trade their draft picks. He wanted them to do what some of these other teams have done, where they've sort of cashed in all of their assets. And you know, they had a solid free agency. They re-signed Norm Powell. He paid him $90 million. Made a couple of decent, veteran free agent signings. Ben McLemore and Cody Zeller. Those are guys that should help their rotation. But you know, he was out there watching other teams go chasing after stars, and they didn't get one in Portland. So, you know, here we are, right where we were a few weeks ago. Is Dame serious about wanting some change, that he would maybe shake the tree, or is he just going to go along and sort of passively, aggressively complain about it? And I guess we'll have to wait and see, because this is sort of the same tone he's taken now for quite some time.
He's repeatedly said that he expects to be a Blazer next year, but it also said, hey, I'm not making any firm decisions on what my future will be. That's Brian Windhorst, whose future includes a safe trip back to the United States here over the next 24 hours. Thank you, sir. Meanwhile, the biggest star on the free agent market is not going anywhere, even though he opted out of his original deal. As expected, Kawhi Leonard will be re-signing with the LA Clippers. Terms still in the process of being finalized. In 2 seasons with the Clips, he's averaged 26 points, 6.8 rebounds, and 5 assists per game.
We really appreciate that. I had to, though, bring back this flow chart that you wrote and posted at the beginning of free agency. We put it on the show that day.
Impressive.
You just did this like in a conference room for yourself, right?
Oh, yeah. I was actually locked in a conference room by myself. There was nobody. There were windows there. And that was we hadn't even gotten to free agency yet. So you imagine what I can do right now with about 4 hours sleep. So, yeah, and that was basically, we showed how Kyle Lowry dictated free agency. And it all lined up as far as Kyle's move to Miami and how all the other pieces kind of fell in place.
Well, from that flow chart, the other storylines that flow are, we're talking about, right, some of the biggest storylines between the season begins. You have got the Dame Lillard situation going on in Portland because, you know, he's got a 4th album coming out. Should we talk about that, Matt?
Absolutely.
Okay. Or maybe we'll talk about which team he's going to play for next year. He has stressed multiple times he has not publicly requested a trade to the Blazers, who, of course, themselves have stayed pretty quiet during free agency. And Dame did give his thoughts, though, on Portland's move so far. Take a listen.
You know, we wasn't able to go out there and just get, you know, some of the guys that we would have liked. And, you know, you go down the list and you go through the guys that you like that are out there that haven't committed to another team or that was a part of your plans in free agency. And you get the ones that, you know, that want to be a part of what you're doing. And I think that's what we did.
All right. So hearing that, Bobby, what should we look for next with Dame's future in Portland?
Yeah, I think this is going to play out a little bit, Rachel. I think Lillard will go to training camp. I expect him to be in a Trailblazer uniform. And this is something that will, when we get to December or January, based on where this Portland team is, and he looks at the pieces that are around him. I mean, they brought Norman Powell back, but then it was all bargain shopping. Cody Zeller, Ben McLemore, Tony Snell. That's kind of your bench for the veteran minimum. And they don't have much out there except for maybe flipping CJ McCollum. So I think this plays out. And the season will basically dictate as far as what Lillard's future is going to be here in Portland.
Matt, it's an interesting position for him as a player because one of the sort of backbones of his tenure in Portland has been how loyal he has been to the franchise, how he's talked about not wanting to just run off and join a super team. But if the front office isn't doing what you think they need to do, does that put you in a rock and a hard place? Because Bobby's talking about maybe asking for a trade mid-season, and that just doesn't seem like it's in Dame Lillard's character.
I think Dame is doing everything he's supposed to do as a player and a leader of that organization and sticking to the script. But I think without being said, this management and front office has a lot of pressure on them. They haven't really done anything significant to make this team a real contender yet in the offseason. Like you said, they can still play with the CJ McCollum and see what they can possibly get with him. But it'll be interesting to see. I mean, loyalty is great, and we all want that loyalty. But at the end of the day, are you going to continue to waste? I wouldn't say waste because they've had some good runs, but are you continue to spend your prime years in a situation where you know you're not going to be able to win a championship? So we'll have to see how this continues to play out, and it'll be interesting to see if come January that they're in the middle of the pack or towards the bottom, of the playoff seeding if he does ask for a trade.
Well, speaking of a guy who so far has hitched his wagon to a franchise that is probably not contending for the top of this conference, let's go over to the East and talk about Bradley Beal. Could have requested a trade before the draft, chose not to. The Wizards instead traded Russell Westbrook, of course, to the Lakers on draft night. The ensuing 5-team deal, Bobby, you're going to need a new flow chart just for this deal, ultimately led to a whole collection of players moving. Spencer Dinwiddie, Kyle Kuzma, KCP, who we should note, he is a good friend of Bradley Beal. So that's an important relationship there. Montrezl Harrell, Aaron Holiday, and more. So, Bobby, Brad does have that extension decision coming up. What does he have to decide next in Washington and when?
Yeah, he still has a little bit of time. That extension would not start until October 1st as far as for him to make a decision. But it's interesting, Rachel. After the season, Tommy Shepard, their general manager, just said that this roster is basically not good enough, and there's going to be a lot of different faces. And he basically took Russell Westbrook into, as you mentioned, Spencer Dinwiddie, and the three from the Lakers, certainly Aaron Holiday. And I think I would trust Tommy. He went out and got Daniel Gafford at the trade deadline, so it shows that they can try to add talent around Bradley. So I think this is another situation that basically plays out itself, and we'll see where this Wizards team is, mid-season. They're not up there where, Brooklyn and, of course, Miami, Milwaukee, Philadelphia, some of those other teams. But it is hard to go from kind of that 5 to 8 seed to jump into that top 3.
I like what they've done this offseason. To me, it was a little bit more of a sense of urgency, counter to what Portland did, which was, grab a few bench pieces. They've added some solid pieces to this team. And although it's top heavy in the East, I see this team anywhere from 5 to 8. You know what I mean? They added a lot of depth. Aaron Holiday is someone solid who's kind of being looked over. I know Montrezl is ready to have a big season. I know Kuz is ready to have a big season. They've added some other pieces. So I like what they've done. Again, I agree with you guys. I don't think they're going to be contending for a title, but they'll definitely be in the mix of that, middle to lower half of the Eastern Conference playoff seeding.
Well, look, if you could make it into the playoffs, not just the play-in, and if you can even win one series, that will be considered a win in Washington, D.C. Not every team's goals are exactly the same every season. I do want to go up I-95 to Philadelphia because the future of Ben Simmons still up in the air. The 3-time All-Star does have 4 more years left on his contract, so that's always important to remember. The Sixers have some time, except also reports are swirling of how much, if any, interaction the two parties have had this summer. It really sounds like most is just being directed through Ben's agent, Rich Paul. So, Bobby, what should we be looking for with Simmons in this situation?
Yeah, I mean, he's another guy. I think we're going to see Ben Simmons in a Sixer uniform when training camp goes, unless the asking price from Daryl Morey, their president, kind of gets a little bit lower here. He's not for everyone, right? He's not for all 29 teams. I think you have to have a certain role, certainly all NBA from a defensive standpoint, but he's different than what James Harden went through a year ago, where you could line up 29 teams and 29 teams would want James Harden on their roster, where Simmons, has to fit a certain role here. And if the asking price gets lower, then yeah, maybe we could see him moved. But when you have a player with 4 years, $147 million left on your contract, you're just not looking to kind of give him away.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit it on the head. They've been asking for a king's ransom, so I think their requests for what they're going to get in exchange will have to come down for him to move. But this is going to be interesting because I don't know how true the reports are, but if there has been no communication with teammates or management, I said last week, and I don't know if the rest of the panel agreed with me, I think what has been said has already kind of the writings on the wall. I don't really know if you can get him back there with the right mindset with the rest of his teammates to really make something of it. But again, he's locked in for 4 more years, so we're going to have to see. But I think if they are going to trade him, I think you made a great point. They're going to have to, be more reasonable with their what they're going to get in return.
It's such a tough question, this one, because yes, some of the toothpaste has left the tube, as Zach Lowe has said about this situation, and we've seen some edginess and hurt feelings. And you want to go into a season like this with your team being your team, and guys feeling like the guys in training camp are the guys they're going to go to battle with. And we've been talking all show about how deep the Eastern Conference is this coming season. All that